Heyo, welcome back to the Undrafted and Unqualified Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Anthony here with Vinny. We're back for some more summer takes, and today we're starting the rankings episodes. So we just put together our top 12 QBs. Um, and yeah, it's gonna be fun. It strays a little from consensus, just the way ours averages out, and I think it's gonna be really exciting because I know, sometimes you do a ranking and it's like, I feel like I'm not bullish enough on a guy or I'm not spicy enough on this take, but I think when we put them together, it's like, okay, this will be a fun thing to do because we do have some takes here that will be a little different than you're gonna expect from the ECR, which is the expert consensus rankings, or the ADP, which is the average draft position. So it's going to be super exciting. We got 12 to do. We got the running backs to do, soon after this. We got a hot takes episode to break up the rankings, and then wide receiver, and a tight ends. And then at that point, we'll be pretty close to when the season starts. So I'm super excited. And I know we're getting into the heat of it. We're almost in August now too, so
Yeah.
we're getting there with football.
Oh yeah, we're definitely close. What is it, like 5 Sundays away at this point now, I think, or
And I
six, something
think
like
I
that.
think I think we get football this Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, the Hall of
Oh,
Fame game.
oh yeah, preseason's. Oh, this Saturday, yeah.
I
Yeah, I
think
think you're right.
so.
Yeah. No, preseason's starting up. It's
So
gonna come before we know it.
yeah. So it's super exciting. We're gonna skip news. We have nothing really to talk about today, so we're just gonna hop into these QBs here, I think, and we'll start with 12, go to one, because it's always the more fun way to do it. Just build the what's the word I'm looking for? Build the excitement. Yeah, build the
Excitement.
excitement. Getting up to one. Um, so yeah, let's start. Again, we kind of went off our averages, right? So if one guy was really down on a guy and then, we were both kind of in the middle on another, because one of us pulled the other guy down, he'll fall below, the said ranking that you'd expect. So the averages is what we're going off of here. So that's just what you're going to see as we go through this. So coming in at number 12, the quarterback 12 for us is Dak Prescott. We're both around that range. I'm slightly higher than Vinny on that. But Dak Prescott, he's going around the same, in your standard drafts. The experts have him a little bit higher, ADP higher as well. So we're a little down actually. He's going nine both of those positions. So we have him here at number 12. And Vinny, since you're a little bit further down, you got him at 13. Let's talk about, why we're a little bit lower on Dak than the rest of the fantasy community.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it in my personal rankings, even going down to 15, I just have these guys all in like a similar tier where, it's not anything, personal against Dak. I just think it's the deepness of the quarterback position this year where, looking at my rankings, I have Purdy, Goff, Dak, even you could go to Stafford at 16. And like all of those guys in my mind have similar outcomes. They're not a lot of rushing upside for them. And they could throw for 40 touchdowns like we saw Stafford do last year, and then he's immediately top five QB. So I think these guys all, like especially Dak, focusing on him, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finished inside the top five. Like that's just
Yeah.
kind of how this works. But um, I think rushing upside has really taken over fantasy. So for Dak, with that not being there, it's really reliant on him throwing 35 plus touchdowns, 4,500 yards to really get in there. And I'm not personally going to bet on that to happen again. We've seen this kind of year on, year off thing with Dak. And thankfully this year there's no injury in mind. So he's going into the year healthy, which was why we were really high on him last year. But I just think he kind of ended up there because of the lack of rushing upside and, not full belief he'll repeat that, I don't know how many his exact stats, but repeat that sort of bounce back year again.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think it's, the rushing upside is why we got other QBs a little higher. Uh,
Yep.
for me too, I feel like this is a very conservative ranking, and I think he could absolutely outperform where we're ranking him. But like we said, he doesn't have that rushing upside. And he's got an elite offense. But, as Vinny just mentioned, it's been an on and off year. It's been every other year he's been producing. So, I'm not going to bank on injury. I'm not really superstitious, but that is something I'm kind of baking in just a little bit is because it's been such a consistent pattern. And, at some point he should break it, and this could absolutely be the year. But it is something I'm just keeping an eye on. And the last piece for me is I think this is going to be a better defense than what they had. So, that will factor in as well. When the Cowboys were terrible, Dak was just he's chucking the ball every time. Like they had to throw.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
think that's a factor maybe. Also, they have a very hard schedule. And
Yep.
hit the difference between Dak and wins and losses was like 24 points a game in wins and like 12 in losses. So, that was a consideration for me as well.
Yeah, I think this is kind of he out of the top 12, I think is one that we could easily get burned on just because of the fact that you think about last year with CD not being there for a majority of the season and what he did with Pickens. And we also saw what he could do with CD without a guy like George Pickens there. So now they're both coming to the year fully healthy. I mean, that receiving tandem alone can just print fantasy points for Dak. So if those guys stay healthy and so does Dak, I find it hard to believe he doesn't creep up into that like top five but it's a lot of what ifs that it's hard to just bet on again this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, it's definitely the conservative approach for us both. But, I think it just kind of says it's probably not a guy we're going out seeking. There's other guys we'd rather take our chances on. But absolutely, Dak should be a top 12 fantasy option again this year. Number 11 comes in for us, just one spot above Dak, is Patrick Mahomes. So Mahomes is coming off the injury, and that's really pulling him down boards. The ECR and ADP both have him at 13. So this is a guy we're a little higher on. We have him up at 11 once again. So, with Mahomes, I think it's just there's not much to talk about here. He
Yeah.
is Patrick Mahomes, who, if we're talking NFL quarterbacks, he's probably the best in the league. However, he's coming off a major injury where he tore his ACL. He's recovering well. And honestly, if we continue to hear good news out of camp and everything, I'll probably start to bump him up my board a little more. But, he also finished at QB 11 last year after missing only about two-ish games. But he started the year so good again. But it has been a couple years since he's been that elite option, finishing, top five. So there is risk baked in with Mahomes, but I think both of us kind of view it as just this is Mahomes. It's really hard to rank him lower, and as long as we get good news coming out about the injury, I think it's probably gonna just be let's keep rising him up because he's so good when he is healthy.
Yeah, and I think a big reason why he's falling besides the injury is the fact that they invested a lot of money in Kenneth Walker,
Mhm.
and then people immediately assume, well, they're just going to run the ball, and like they paid this guy a
Yeah.
bunch of money to go run the ball. I think you could look at it the exact opposite way and be like,
Me
this
too.
offense is going to move like
Mhm.
it did 4 or 5 years ago when Mahomes was having those finishes you mentioned to me earlier with the enemy. I know you're probably going
Yep.
to get into that, but I think you could look at it like that. They now have an elite running back along with a fully healthy Rashee Rice who has the off the field stuff, but he's going to be there. He's a full participant in training camp right now. As of now, he'll be the start there week one. Xavier Worthy is still an option. Travis Kelsey. So this offense is still, in that elite tier if Patrick Mahomes is fully healthy and you add Kenneth Walker to that, it just like you said, I can just imagine it's Patrick Mahomes. Then you add these sort of weapons around him. It's gonna work.
Yeah. And you mentioned like just pieces there. The Chiefs are always a team that's like, oh well, here's this old free agent, wide receiver.
Yeah,
Could he
yeah.
go there? I genuinely think this is a destination for Keenan Allen if he continues to play. I think
Hmm.
it's also a destination for Stephon Diggs. So, they might not even be done making moves if they feel that they need to. But it's also something to be said if they feel like they're really content with the room they have. But yeah, I'm entirely on board with you. I think Ken Walker makes this offense better. And in turn, it makes Patrick Mahomes better for
Yep.
fantasy. So
Hmm.
I love it. And yeah, as you mentioned, right, Bieniemy is back as the offensive coordinator, and this is big for him. When Bieniemy was the coordinator for the Chiefs from 2018 to 2022, Patrick Mahomes' fantasy finishes were 1, 7, 4, 4, and 1. So this guy was a top 7 quarterback all 5 years, a top 4 quarterback 4 of the 5 years, and the number one quarterback 2 of the 5 years. So I think this is going to work very well. Bieniemy was great with a good running back in Kareem Hunt. So I'm very excited for Mahomes. He is going to continue to rise, as I said, as long as we continue to hear reports about him being healthy. That is kind of the one thing keeping me at somewhat of a conservative place for him in my rankings.
Yeah, but I mean, with that said, it's definitely encouraging and, exciting that he's already been listed as a
Yep.
full participant in camp.
Yep.
So it's not like this is like we thought. And also, it's crazy that that's the case. Where I feel like he tore. This was an injury that happened in the last week of the season. They didn't know if he would be ready, and now he's ready a month before the season even starts. So,
Yep.
yeah, he's just different.
Yeah, yeah, Patrick Mahomes, man. I already bumped him up 1 or 2 spots because of that news.
Yep,
And speaking of bumping up spots, I'm realizing we forgot our honorable mentions.
that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
so yeah, just outside the top 12, just a quick mention that there you're not going to see them in the top 12 for us is Brock Purdy for me is right outside there, and Vinny actually has Bo Nix in the top 12, who just because I'm low on him just missed the cut.
Hmm.
But those are 2 guys we just wanted to bring up the names. You won't see them in this list, but got to throw those honorable mentions in there real quick. So yeah, there you have that with those two. But let's move right along now, getting into the top 10. So our quarterback 10 here, we have Trevor Lawrence. Um, Trevor Lawrence is our number 10, which is pretty much right in line with ADP and the rest of the community. So number 10, I think it's a fine ranking for him. He feels to me very risky. Like we saw that back half of the year, he was elite. Like he finished as a top 5 quarterback last year, and he could absolutely do it again if that continues. He's got Liam Cohen. Maybe the breakout is here. And the rushing was there. The rushing touchdowns were there. I think he had 9. So, the rushing ability, as we said, we mentioned like that's rushing upside over Dak, who doesn't have that same ability. But to me, I see some regression. I see, some other guys where I'd rather take the shot on. I just think there's such a large range of outcomes with Trevor Lawrence that, if he continues to fall, I'm not afraid to pull the trigger on him, but it just feels like one of those picks where he doesn't feel safe as a top 12 guy to me. We saw him do it and in this exact same offense, which is why I'm like, I really can't put him any lower. But at the same time, he does feel a little bit risky to me. But again, rushing ability, that helps a lot. And if they use him in the red zone with rushing touchdowns and stuff, like he could be very, very good once again.
Yeah, no, similar opinion on him, honestly. I feel like you said, that rushing upside is a little bit inflated for sure, and definitely factored into his finish last year, which you can't take away, but like you said, I think it's easy to kind of predict some sort of regression. He's not really, when you think Trevor Lawrence, you don't think rushing ability. I think a lot of those touchdowns were inside the 5 yard line, and he's not breaking off 40-yard runs like Lamar, Jaden Daniels, like that, those types of players. So he does, I actually had him lower, I think, compared to you, because he does kind of fit into that tier of like almost pocket passers for me, but he's above them for me because of that sort of scoring upside on the rushing side of things. So wide range of outcomes for him, but I feel like this again is a safer ranking, because if the rushing does click again, he has great weapons. We've talked about, like the receiving situation in Jacksonville. The guy to have might just be Trevor Lawrence, because he's the guy giving all these guys the ball. So we know the outcome could be a big hit, but I think we're on the safer side here because of the baked-in regression.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point too. Like I know if I'm thinking about the draft, right? I would definitely let him fall before I were to take him. If there's
Yeah,
a guy in my league who's very bullish and is like, oh, I want Trevor Lawrence and wants to go out and get him, like I'll let him do that. Because again, we have this wide, like this big tier. It's really deep at the quarterback position this year too. So I think, you just said it too. He's got kind of that pocket passing kind of play style where it's like you have a tier of guys doing the same thing. So I don't see any problem just waiting a little longer and taking Dak. So,
yeah,
we'll see. We'll see. Really play it out in the draft, but not a guy I'm going to be like seeking and like, oh, I need to draft this guy.
yeah. And the fact that there's no clear stack with him, I think also like brings that down. Unless you're really high on a guy like Parker Washington, Brian Thomas, it's just you can't perfectly predict that stack. So that's another reason why.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost one of those two where it's like it's tough to get on board with the name just because he hasn't really been good in his career, but he really
Yeah.
showed it in the second half. So it's just one of those you have to buy into that second half performance post
Yep.
bye week from him last year.
Yep.
Number nine, both of us have him at nine. Jackson Dart. Um, let's see. I know ECR down at 12. So the pros, the experts, as you could say, don't really like him much. But then you have the rest of the community, the public, they love him. He's going at like seven in some leagues. So he's going very high. I think I think we're probably in the best spot, I'd say. I think nine is the
Yeah.
best range for him. I think seven is high. I think 11's too low. I think finding that sweet spot is perfect. This dude has elite rushing upside. He came into the league last year, had some games in the upper 20s. He was really, really good. Harbaugh's there now. You'll have Malik Neighbors back at some point. Scadaboo should be back, hopefully for week one. You add a rookie in Malachi Fields, a bunch of old guys in Odell, Juju Smith-Schuster. You add
Yeah.
some of these guys, but there's one big thing for me is just we saw a game where it was like under a point. So my biggest concern is that if he has a bad game, he's losing you the week. So I think that's why I'm not going to be super bullish on him and take him at QB7 or anything like that. Um, and he's still young. He's still young. He's going into year two. He wasn't great when he wasn't just like making plays and firing. Like when plays were really drawn up for him, he wasn't as good. And then now you have Matt Nagy coming in as the offensive coordinator, and that's brutal. I hate that. Which is, I'd probably have him up at seven if it was Cliff Kingsbury over Matt Nagy, but they decided Matt Nagy instead. So yeah, I feel like it's just that sweet spot for him right there at nine where I love it. I think he is a target for me in drafts. But if he's going at seven in the draft, I'm not going to be taking him there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that seven's too high. I like our spot at nine. I think, this is a sort of different tier for me. We talked about some of those pocket passers that don't have as much rushing upside. And this is a new tier where this guy creates fantasy points on his own. Like he doesn't even need to rely on. We saw it last year. The weapons surrounding him last year weren't great at all. I mean, his wide receiver one was Wandale Robinson, who got paid, but this
Mhm.
is kind of a gadget receiver where, or not gadget, but slot guy that's underneath a lot, catching a lot of balls, like 5 yards down the field or from the line of
Yeah.
scrimmage. And this was all without Malik Neighbors. They had Isaiah Likely, who's a name that
Yep.
I think you forgot to mention. But in Harbaugh is the big thing for me. It's that this is a guy that worked with Lamar, developed Lamar throughout his whole career since being drafted, and a similar sort of play style. I'm not going to call Jackson Dart Lamar, but like the rushing upside, like you said, is real. So it's a coach that knows how to deal with it, which is why like Matt Nagy, I guess, isn't the best coordinator, but you have John Harbaugh there who's running the show for the most part. So that kind of eases me there. Yeah, he's gonna in that 1 week. I think it stings a little more because I believe it was in the fantasy playoffs where he dropped 1 point or negative points because
Yeah.
he just
Something
was
terrible.
horrible. So I think that sticks a little more with you because it was one of his last games that he played. But like
Mhm.
you said, this guy was averaging 20 plus per game points per game over when he got the starting job.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I want to go higher, but like you said, I just, feel like this is a good spot for him. And I wouldn't blame me if you went and bumped him up to 7 because he has
Yeah.
that true kind of upside we saw with Jaden Daniels in his rookie year, and everyone's drafting this guy as a top 5 QB. So I don't really think it's much different. And the chance of Malik Neighbors coming back and being a factor is, even more exciting. So
Yeah.
yeah, big on Jackson Dart this year.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. I think Dart for me, I wouldn't care if you were on the other side of the coin here, but for me, Dart is kind of that last guy where I would want to double up on quarterback. I think
Yeah,
if I took Dart, I'd want to take a second one, especially with the depth, because there is so much there. Like you could go Dart and then, Goff if you wanted to late, or Dart and, maybe Mahomes is sitting there and then
yeah.
that would feel really good. Um, but yeah, like if you want to go the other way, say Dart's the dude, get him as your one QB. Like this is the start of where I'd be like, okay, like I feel like you could sell me on that because he does have such elite rushing upside.
No, I think it's a good point because even if we continued our rankings past 12, I mean, for me, there's almost guys until 20 that like you could
Yeah.
draft and like
Yep.
like you said, pair with a guy like Dart, where there's definitely some risk based on him. But if you pair him with a guy like even Stafford, that's a steady guy on your bench that just won MVP last year, and you could get him at the end of your draft. So yeah, no, I think that's a good point to pair him with a steady guy.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, number 8. So again, we do averages, and the two guys above our number 8 QB, so the QB 6 and the QB 7, they were pulled up above this guy. So our QB 8 was number 7 for both of us, but with the way the averages work, he falls to 8. Justin Herbert is our quarterback 8 here. Herbert, that's pretty much where he's going. So again, we're kind of in line with the pros, the community. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm seeing in terms of ADP, Justin Herbert on ESPN is going at QB 15. That's a
Wow,
steal. We're
got to
we're
join
not
some
going to buy
ESPN
that
leagues.
very much because across every other platform and the experts, he's going around 8. So I think we're kind of right in line, and I'm going to just chalk that up as an outlier there for ESPN. But Justin Herbert, I'm very excited for Justin Herbert, but I've been doing a lot of starting. So Vinny, I'll let you start Justin Herbert this time.
Yeah, I believe I had him highest out of us two at 7 in my personal
Yeah,
rankings.
yeah, I have him
Um,
at 7 too. He just
oh, we
fell
do.
that
Okay.
he
Yep.
fell that
Yep.
way because of the averages when we averaged it all out.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, it just feels like all of this offseason, the stars are aligning for Herbert. I mean, you bring in Mike McDaniel, who we know what he can do in Miami, one of the best offenses of all time a few years ago with Tyreek to Jalen Waddle, Mostert. So, we know what he can do. But I think the big piece is we saw what Herbert was again capable of. We all knew he was an elite sort of real life quarterback, but since his second year, we haven't really seen that elite fantasy finish where he finished number 2 that year. So this year, or I mean, at the start of last year, through the first 10 or so weeks, he was an elite fantasy quarterback. We're talking about like top 5 numbers, putting up 20 a week, points per game wise. So, you know, I think when something like that happens and then this situation improves in the offseason where his O line's now starting to get healthy, Amarian Hampton's healthy, Mike McDaniel's there. You bring in, you lose Keenan Allen, but Gadsden year 2, who I'm high on. You have Ladd, Quinn Johnston, Trey. Like there's a lot of weapons surrounding him, protection from the O line, and then Mike McDaniel to kind of be the wizard behind it all and
Mhm.
put Justin Herbert in a good place. I think it's just in line for a massive bounce back year in terms of his career. The only thing is, I'm just curious to see if the rushing uptick from last year continues or if that goes back to where he was kind of like in the 250 to 300 range rather than pushing almost 500 rushing yards. So that's a big question mark for me. But really excited about everything else that Herbert could do this year.
Yeah, I'm entirely in the same boat with you on all of it, right? I think Mike McDaniel's super exciting. Tua led the league in passing with Mike
Yeah,
McDaniel.
yeah,
So I think it wouldn't shock me at all if Herbert did it. And the weapons are there, as you said. The O line is improved a lot, so less sacks. I think this is going to be a very high-powered offense, and this could be one of those pocket passer guys that you do see finish very highly. A lot of touchdowns could come with it. I think this is very exciting, and a lot of people are excited about the Chargers as well. And then also just he has finished at QB2 before. So we've
Yeah.
seen it before, which is why it's one of those where it's like, past success is a great predictor of future success. So I think that's exciting for Herbert. But I'm with you on the rushing too. He was second in the league in rushing yards in the quarterback position last year with
Wow.
498. So Josh Allen was the only one who had more. I do think that takes a hit. And we saw it take a hit in the second half. He was using his legs so much in that first half, which is why his points were so good. And that's why he was up there like a top five QB. But then that second half, when he wasn't rushing as much, he was back down to like a QB 12, borderline unplayable some weeks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why it's like, we're finding that sweet spot once again because I think both of us are predicting some regression in the rushing yards category. But the way he could be throwing the ball this year, you got to put him higher than where he ended up finishing last year.
And I think the rushing, it's definitely, I think it definitely regresses. I didn't, that's a crazy stat, second in the league. I
Second,
would have never
yeah.
thought, I knew it was a lot for him, but
He
um,
had 11 more yards than Dart. He had almost 50 more yards than Drake May on the ground.
wow,
Mahomes
that's
had a
crazy.
lot last year, which I didn't
Oh yeah,
realize, but
yep,
he had more
yeah.
than Hurts. So yeah.
I mean, in Herbert's case, though, we know Jim Harbaugh's belief in him. Like
Oh yeah.
Jim Harbaugh's in love with Justin Herbert. So I think that almost it was instilled because obviously Mike McDaniel wasn't there last year, but I feel like the rushing uptick was instilled from Harbaugh. Like I think he knows what Justin Herbert's capable of and talks about the athlete he is. So I don't think we're going to be pushing 500 again this year, but I could see over 350 again, with some
Yeah.
touchdowns mixed in. So I don't think it goes away completely, but it's hard to expect 500 again.
Yeah, he's exciting. And, I originally kind of like pinned him as a target QB for me. But at the
Yep.
same time, some of these middle guys, I'm just like, I'd rather just wait and take
Yeah.
someone later. And that's
Yep.
the tough thing with me for drafting Herbert. But man, like, if for whatever reason any of these guys we've been talking about start falling a little bit, they're going to be so much fun to draft.
Yep.
Number seven. So this is where there's a little disparity. I have him up at five, Vinny down at eight. Pulls his average right above Justin Herbert's average between the two of our rankings. This is Jaden Daniels. This is low. He's going much higher. He's at five, across the rest of the community. And, I'm right in line with that, but Vinny's got him down at eight. And, I feel like I'm not high on Jaden Daniels either, but I felt like I couldn't put him lower than five. So I want to hear why you got him down there and you feel pretty good about having him that low.
Yeah, I think a lot of, the reason of him being back here is obviously because of what he did in his rookie year, which like, can't be forgotten. He led his team to the conference finals
Yep.
and put up this a top five fantasy QB season.
Mhm.
And obviously the injury happened last year. I just think that even last year, I think I was a little down on him prior to the draft because of the fact that I just feel like that's such a hard year to replicate. We don't see it happen very often. And that still wasn't even near like the Josh Allens of the world or the Lamars of the world.
Mhm.
So that puts him in a volatile space for me where like yeah, if he was a top five QB, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But if he finished outside the top 10, I wouldn't, I would also not be surprised. That's why I kind of have him at eight. It just feels like a volatile position. And we just talked about, like, not comparing the players, but we just talked about all the additions, the excitements that happened this offseason for Herbert. In Daniel's case, there really wasn't any additions. It was more so, they drafted some rookie wide receivers who knows what they could be. I know, and people are high on guys like Antonio Williams, but it's just still such a big if. I mean, these are like third round receivers. These aren't elite first round guys that had elite college profiles. So there wasn't much addition from that career year with Jaden Daniels. And you think they would invest more into Jaden Daniels,
Mhm.
protect him a little bit more. But I just haven't seen that. And so we're now talking almost 2 years ago since this all happened. and it's hard for me to just put belief that this guy will just go out and replicate it again. I think it's going to be a rough, or maybe not rough, but just a slow beginning back to getting to that point. I think it's definitely still possible, but I'd rather take my shots on some guys that we have recent news on, recent updates, recent like acquisitions that made their teams better and put them in a better spot to score fantasy points. But again, like the rushing upside is so real. Like it's just it could that's the reason that he could be up all the way at 3, and I wouldn't be surprised. So definitely could in a spot to get burned in my own personal rankings, but there's just some guys that I have more belief in for this year.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's a scary situation. Like I think they lost their center to the Chargers, Tyler Biadasz or some I don't know how to say it, but I think
Yep.
he left this offseason, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was 1 year ago, but he's gone. You're right, they didn't really invest. Antonio Williams, sure. But there's like we're still waiting. Is Ayuk gonna go there? Is Diggs gonna go there? Like we don't know. That would be a huge boost. Either one of those guys would be a boost. Um, but Terry's getting older. They bring in Chigakonkwo. That's great, I guess. But Zach Ertz is on the out too, and he had a big role. Rashad White, the running game should be a little better, which should help. You have a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of change, but it's a very I'm not excited about this offense, not at
Yeah.
all. And I do think they might finish last in the division. So when you think about them being a team that's not very good, you don't really want to take a QB from that team. I have him at 5. I just felt like I couldn't put him any lower. I just felt that way. Although I will not be taking him at 5, I will not be taking him where he's going. I would much rather just wait and take somebody else. The reason being, this is the number one reason why. I was looking through his game log from last year, and even in games that weren't great, he still had like 17 points. So he was never
Yeah.
really losing you weeks because of the rushing upside. And his scramble rate last year, which I'll pull it up right now, I believe it was number one in the league by a large margin, was almost 16%. It was at 15.5%. The next highest scramble rate was Tyrod Taylor at almost 13%. So he had a huge disparity in scramble rate. Like if we're talking, besides Tyrod and Justin Fields, it's Drake May down at almost 10.5. So a 5% higher scramble rate than like really the next guy. Jaden Daniels, I mean, he's just gonna rush so much, and I
Yeah.
think that really says something about his floor. And it's just I'm in such a weird spot too in our league, our keeper league. It's like, do I want to keep him as a round 2 in a super flex? I don't know because he'll probably be a round 1 pick, so there's value there. But it just he's so volatile with the injury. He's a lean build. He was hurt. But the
Yeah.
floor is just so high for him, which I just felt like I couldn't put him any lower.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point of like how much he relies on the rushing side of things for fantasy points. I think that's another reason for me where like, you talked about his build. This isn't a Josh Allen that's going into like truck guys as they like truck linebackers to try and get that extra yard. Like this is the guy that's sliding, making the smart choice, which he should do considering his build. But that just worries me further because of the fact that, you know, if he's relying so much on the run game, it's just putting him in a spot to potentially get injured again. And you
Yeah.
never want to predict injuries. That's not why I have him at 8, but it is kind of a worry of mine that he relies too much on the rushing upside.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of Lamar's build. And,
Yeah.
with Lamar, you have years he finishes at number 1, and you
Yeah.
have years he's hurt or something goes wrong and he finishes
Yep.
at 20. So it feels very similar. But the floor feels very high as long as he's healthy.
Yep.
In the reverse rankings for us, we have QB6, Jalen Hurts. I have him down at 8, Vinny at 5. I'll start why I'm down on Hurts. I think he's going 6 kind of across the board, so right below Jaden Daniels in most leagues. We got him one spot higher than Jaden Daniels in our rankings. We got him at 6 here instead of, Jaden Daniels at 7. I think Jalen Hurts, we had literally just opposite rankings here, which created an equal average. And I was okay putting Hurts one spot higher because he's done it every year. He feels less volatile. He's had like double digit rushing touchdowns like every year, except last year he only had 8. He still had 8. He still finished at QB8. The second half of the year wasn't great. You look at that first half; those numbers were elite. My biggest worry, though, I don't like the change across the offense. I'm very worried about it. I think you lose AJ Brown, that really concerns me. I think a new coordinator, I just don't know how much I buy this being him being good. They had Lane Johnson missing a ton of games. I have question marks about that offensive line. Will it return to form from 2 years ago, or will it be more like last year? I just don't buy that this is going to be the same high powered offense we have. I think this will be a bottom half, still hopefully top 20, but between 15 to 20, it just doesn't, I don't see as many points happening because of that. Devontae Smith, that's awesome. Makai Lemon, he's been banged up so far. So he hasn't even gotten a chance. Eli Stowers, their other high pick, we've heard nothing out of camp about him, and even some negative reports. He's just not going to be ready. So there's just a lot of question marks for me with the offense, and I wonder if they can score enough points for Hurts to be kind of a valuable pick. And then Saquon too. Like, is Saquon still the same guy? I don't know. I know a lot of his numbers were down last year. I think he should be good again, but at the same time, he is starting to hit that running back age cliff. So there's just so many question marks for me where I wanted to drop him, be a little conservative with it, and I'll probably just pass on him and take somebody later because he will go high in drafts. It's still Jalen Hurts. And like I said, it's that rushing floor. It's very similar to Jaden Daniels. There's that rushing floor, but there are so many variables that make it, it feels tough to take him, for me at least.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny because I think I'm gonna just use a similar argument that or like that you use for in like praise of Jaden Daniels is that
Mhm.
this guy has never really he's been a fantasy stud for a while at the quarterback position, and he's never really relied on passing volume. Like his highest career passing touchdowns in a season is 25. So when you say that, you think like, how has this guy been number one at the position, top five, multiple years? Well, it's because he just loads up on rushing touchdowns. And last year was the first year in 4 years, or for the past 4 years, he's had double digit rushing touchdowns,
Yeah,
peaked
four.
at 15,
Yeah.
14. And
Yep.
last year he had 8. So of course there's going to be a big dip in his overall fantasy points. But like you said, that still was a QB8 finish for him. And so I was telling Ant this before, but shout out Mason Dodd. I was listening in a stream where he was drafting Jalen Hurts. And he kind of put it perfectly where I think there's been this outside argument of Jalen Hurts as a horrible NFL quarterback. Like people were talking about sitting him last year after he threw 4 picks. And like, sure, there can be NFL fans that feel that way, and they have every right to feel that way because he doesn't look good in some games. But
Hmm.
in terms of fantasy points, this guy just prints them. I mean, he's going to get rushing touchdown. He's going to rush the ball at the 1 yard line inside the 5. You can basically bank it's going to be Saquon or Jalen Hurts. So that's a
Yep.
50-50 shot right there for you in terms of fantasy points. So I think this is a guy in terms of we talk a lot about regression for some quarterbacks at their like rushing side. I think we obviously see an increase here where he gets back to that double digit range. They're gonna rely on him a lot this year to it's kind of a prove it year for him. So I'm taking the side of that he proves some people wrong in terms of fantasy, and he's right back into that, top 3 sort of tier where he could in a really good year he could push Josh Allen, which like sounds hard to believe, but in a really good year for him he's that has that kind of upside because of the scoring ability and the rushing side. So obviously there's volatility with losing AJ Brown. You kind of lose your one option at receiver, that or Devontae Smith, stud too, but yeah, there's volatility, but I'm kind of on the opposite end where I think he gets back to that elite tier.
Yeah, that's what it is for me though. The last 5 years he finished 9, 3, 2, 8, and 8. But last year he had a career high in passing touchdowns. I think we see a drop in that again a little bit. I do think the rushing touchdowns can go back up, but the yards were down again last year too. So I think that's where I think maybe we see a little bit more regression to the mean with what he's done, but I think the yards could be down. I do think the touchdowns can go back up, but at the same time, I don't love the offense. So That's what it is for me, but you make some good points as well. We got to keep moving on. QB5, again, based on averages, he's our both of our six, which bumps him up because the rankings of eight on Hurts and Daniels pulled them down. Caleb Williams comes in at QB5 for us. He's going right about seven across the board. So we're higher on him. And I think there's every reason to like this guy. He had his ups and downs last year, but we're going into year two of the offense with Colston Loveland, year two of the offense with Luther Burden, year two of the offense with Ben Johnson. So I love it. You have Swift again, Monangai again. He's going into year two. I think there's just a lot to like in terms of improvement from this offense. Good O line. The defense isn't very good. They were actually not very good last year. They forced turnovers, but they let up a lot of points at times. So if their defense struggles again, Caleb Williams might be throwing more. He might throw for 4,000 yards this year for the first time for a Bears quarterback. And Caleb has that sneaky rushing upside as well, as we know. And I just everybody's going to talk about the pass percentage, like the completion percentage, right? And oh, it's so bad, it's so bad. But shout out to Ben Solak, who's with ESPN. He had a couple like reels and stuff I was watching earlier this offseason where he was saying his completion percentage is so low that when you watch him, he's throwing the ball in ways that the defender can't even get there. So he's gonna make those plays in ways that are so safe that the defender can't get there as well. So if he can just take some more shots, a couple more risks, he's now going into year three, more comfortable in this offense with Ben Johnson, and that completion percentage goes up a little bit. I mean, this guy could be in for a hell of a year. So I'm definitely in on Caleb Williams. There's just the other guys we have in front of him, just very hard to rank him above them because we still need to see the step forward.
Yeah, no, I hate to hype this guy up being a Packers fan, but
Yeah.
I think he deserves it. I mean, the talent is real there.
Hmm.
This is kind of the poster boy for me in terms of, everyone's arguing about Luther Burden, Romo Dunze, Colston Loveland. My take is just draft Caleb Williams and have a fun week
Yeah.
or have a fun time just watching him throw touchdowns to those guys and whoever it ends up being. Um, yeah, I mean he can just make throws that other quarterbacks just can't. He does kind of have that sort of Mahomes playing style where,
Yep.
like you said, that builds in a rushing upside because he's so creative with like escaping pressure, kind of making plays with his feet that just sometimes turns into 40 yards on the ground in a game, which is 4 points for you, and he might get in the end zone. So, yeah, the rushing upside's there where it's like a nice, comfortable rushing upside where he doesn't rely on it. But I think he absolutely throws for 4,000 yards this year. It's hard to believe that he won't without an injury. And then that means touchdowns go up. I just think everything kind of takes a step up where it pushes him into this range where he could. I think we obviously both think it, but he's going to push for top five at the position. So yeah, a lot to like here and tough to admit for me.
For sure. And you'll see why we can't get him any higher here. Our top four, you might be surprised by. Coming in at number four, Lamar Jackson, who's going at two across the board in the community. We have him down at four. And, we talked about it, in that bust episode. I know Vinny mentioned a lot about that. I think for me, the biggest thing is just you could have a year where he's the number one. You could have a year where he's the number 20. And also just the back half of the year was terrible. He started the year, if you look at his numbers, the start of the year last year, he was elite. So yeah, you could chalk it up. If he's healthy, he's gonna be right back to form for sure. But he gets hurt a lot. My biggest concern is what's the offense gonna look like, right? It's a new staff, new OC. And my even bigger worry for me, they lost Isaiah Likely, they lost Charlie Kohler, both
Yeah.
tight ends there. You lost Tyler Linderbaum. So the offensive line got worse. The blocking tight ends aren't there. So I'm worried about what it could look like in terms of, is he going to get rushed a lot and get sacked a lot? I mean, probably not when he'll just run around everybody. But at the same time, like that pressure, I just don't see a huge passing year for him. The rushing floor, again, absolutely there. Hard not to rank him highly because that's there, and we've seen him finish at one multiple times. But there's some really big question marks for me in that rushing game. And what's the offensive line going to look like this year? How are the tight ends going to look? They lose likely as a pass catcher too, not even just a blocking guy. So a lot of question marks for me in general with that offense there.
Yeah, I have Lamar at 4, so one spot lower than Ant. But yeah, I think the coaching switch is a big deal. And I won't lie, I think I have a little personal grudge because I traded for him last year coming off the injury, and I thought it was a savvy move. I'm going to get the QB1 back, and he just didn't show up. So, but I think that's a real sign of like, he didn't show up at all. Like
Right.
this was a non-startable quarterback almost. So, um, that volatility there does scare me at this current draft price. Like, I wouldn't go near it, even if he dropped down to like Q. I don't know. I don't know where he would have to go for me to want to draft him. But yeah, it's real. Another year where they don't add a pass catcher for him. They, like you said, just lost a bunch of them and lost protection on the offensive line. So it's hard for me to just slot him in at 2, where he's been every year behind Josh Allen. No one says a word about it. And this is the first year we kind of see people start to like, he's down to the 3 spot. I'm comfortable moving him down further potentially because I just don't know if this is going to be the same player we've kind of just grown to expect to just slot in at the 2 spot every year.
Yeah, I mean he's at 4 for us for a reason,
Yeah.
and we see the community put him at 2. That just tells me I'm not drafting him. I'm not touching
Yep.
him. So, and as we're going through this, I'm starting to notice. I'll take either of our top 2 guys, which we'll get to, but I think it just feels so much better to just wait. And
Yeah.
there will be certain players like in this range of guys we've just mentioned where they will fall because somebody else is not as high on him or the league's not as high on him. And that's great. You then take the guy after he falls, but I don't want to reach. I really don't want to reach just because I think there's so much value in some of the later QBs that we mentioned.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm with you. Won't be touching Lamar this year. Our quarterback 3, Joe Burrow. Vinny all the way up at 2. He's going, I believe he's number 4 across the board. So we're a little higher. We're a little higher than, the consensus, the ADP, the ECR. So, we're here at 3. Vinny up at 2, which pulls him up slightly. What do you like about Burrow this year so much?
I mean, I think it's, what was the line you used, that past success is a predictor of future success? Yeah, like that's the case with Burrow. I think, we saw what he's capable of when he's fully healthy, plays a full year, in 22, a QB4 finish, in 24, which was only 2 years ago at this point, a QB3 finish. So um this guy is in just an elite offense, obviously tied to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. And a big piece for me is that like I feel like we've never really seen an elite running back with Burrow, beside Mixon at some point in his career, but like that was still at the end of Mixon almost, like right before he went to Houston and had a good year there. But we get Chase Brown for a full year now, where we see what Chase Brown can do in that offense, and there's just so many pieces. I was high on Burrow last year, and the injury got in the way again.
Yep.
Um, I just think it's hard for me to not put this guy high every year because I don't want to predict an injury. Like I'm not going to put him at 10 because he'll miss 5 games. Like,
Yep.
I'm going to predict a full season for him, and if he plays a full season, he's top 5. So we see that be the case year in and year out. And at the end of last year, he was very good, and he showed that he still obviously has that in the tank. When you have a blanket of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I think a lot of people could be, but it also helps that Joe Burrow's super talented and can make a lot of throws that other quarterbacks can't. So for me, it's just the fact that he's fully healthy coming into the year, similar offense surrounding him. The defense might get a little better, it got a little better, which I think you could argue against him in some ways. But the only thing is there's not much rushing upside, but this is truly a guy that could throw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, which that beats Josh Allen. Like it doesn't matter what Josh Allen does. If he throws, that's a big if, but he just truly has the potential, and that's not really exaggerating a lot of things. So that's just why I'm so high on Joe Burrow. Just the upside is so real from the passing side of things.
Yeah, I just think that's a perfect season for him if
Oh
he
yeah,
throws that
definitely.
much. And with that, which he basically did a couple years ago, he only finished at QB3. So we do have him for what I believe is at his ceiling. Um, and it's tough to rank him there. I'm probably not drafting him because of that. I put him as a bust in our bust episode just because I believe QB3 he really has to have a spectacular season, which he's very capable of, which is why I don't have him any lower. He had a great end to the year too, coming off the injury. Um, but you know, it's one of those things where it's like we have to. I would love to see some rushing touchdowns or something just to like
Yeah.
push him over that cap, which he just doesn't have. So that's why he's just right there at 3 for me.
And I think that's perfectly fair because of the fact that the rushing upside isn't there.
Yeah, and then our QB2 who comes in here right above. People have the QB2 as Lamar Jackson. We have Drake May. Drake May comes in at QB2 for us. Man, I'm so excited for Drake May. I think we saw how good he could be, the MVP runner up last year. The offense gets better. Oh, the schedule. I get it. But when we look at the playoffs and the teams he actually played, it was four of the top five defenses in the league. And it was his first playoffs. It was like people just fail to factor in that, like, this was the situation here. This was his first time in the playoffs. It was some really, really good defenses, and there were still plays he made. I mean, Houston, who I would argue might have been the best defense that we faced, that one pass, the touchdown pass to Kayshon Boutte, that it was like the perfect placement, unbelievable catch. Drake May can make these plays. And he has a lot of rushing upside as well. As I mentioned, that 10% scramble rate. Now you add A.J. Brown, you add Romeo Dobbs. You're running it back with Mike Vrabel again. The offensive line is improving. There's a lot to like here about Drake May. I personally just feel like I can't put him any lower. As statistically good as he was with, all the stats he had last year, he was like number one in completion percentage, number one in this, number one in so he was just very, very, very good last year, and I think that continues, especially with an improved offense.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's hard to find a way. Like I was trying to find a way to drop him. I won't lie, I was trying to, but
Yeah,
he's just so efficient, like you said. And with the added pieces of AJ Brown, being finally getting an alpha for Drake May, it's just even more reason to like him where he's going to throw the ball a lot more, probably to just to please AJ Brown, but also because that makes your offense better. But I think there are the reasons I was trying to find a way is because there are some concerns. He does have sort of a target on his back this year where teams are gonna game plan for him, not like they weren't last year, but it's just even more the reason where they made the Super Bowl. It's his year 3 breakout year. Let's find a way that we just stop this guy. So that's going to be the case. I think he's absolutely capable of, overcoming that. He showed it in the playoffs last year where, he just found a way to make plays, even if it wasn't pretty on the stat sheet. But yeah, I think it's another big year. There's a lot of, QB2 last year, and there's room for growth. That's just a great sign in terms of fantasy. So yeah, no, I could flip flop Burrow and him in my rankings. I just, worry if there is some sort of regression as teams in the NFL just always find a way to figure a guy out somehow and stop him in some degree. Not saying that'll be the case, but big year ahead of him for sure. In all facets, passing and rushing.
yeah. I mean, the Super Bowl hangover is a thing, so I
Yep.
will say that. But he's super exciting and it feels very safe, as much as the upside is like endless.
Yep.
And then number one, no surprise here. He's number one everywhere. It's Josh Allen once again. And, I'll say last year we were in Josh Allen number one for both of us. And I believe he was going number two behind Lamar for a
Yeah.
lot of
Yep.
people. And we were like, this guy finishes at 1 and 2 every
Yeah.
year. We have to put Josh at one. Sure enough, where does he finish? QB1. Where does Lamar finish? I don't know, but not top 12.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just something to be said. There's not a lot to say here about Josh Allen. He finishes as a top Q2 QB every year. And Now, as much as I don't like DJ Moore, you add DJ Moore to this offense. That can only make him better. So yeah, Josh is going to be a fantastic pick. And if he does not go in the second or third round in your drafts this year, go get him. If he falls to the fourth, because I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, QBs go too early, QBs go too early, and they start falling. If he's there in the fourth, you take Josh Allen.
Yes.
I wouldn't take him in the second personally, just because I feel like it's a reach, but it's still not a bad pick, even if you want to do that. I wouldn't do it, but it's not a bad pick if you want to do that. But if he falls any round later than that, you gotta start considering it. He's that good.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely in a tier of his own. I think, at least for me, like it's separated completely from even guys like Drake May and Joe Burrow. Like he's just that good at the fantasy for the fantasy or the quarterback position in fantasy. Go a step further. I think at our rings episode last year, I said like, at what point do we just start to consider taking him in the late second? Because he's just an automatic 400 plus fantasy points a year,
Yep.
and for me, in some mock drafts, I've just loved it if I have like a top three pick, getting a guy like Gibbs or Chase or Bijan, and then getting a guy like Bowers, and then on that round three turn, taking Josh Allen, and it's just like you look at your fantasy team, and it's Jamar Chase, Brock Bowers, Josh Allen. It's like how do I lose a week with all these positional advantages? So I've even gotten comfortable enough drafting him in the early third for me, just because he's such an outlier at the position and so consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the third is kind of where I've noticed him going a lot. And that I would start to consider. Probably still wouldn't go after it, but
Yep.
if he makes it to the fourth, I am probably hitting the draft button.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to see him in the second. If he goes there, whoever drafts him can have him. But again,
Yep.
he's the QB1, hands down.
Yep.
And with that said, we're coming up pretty close to an hour here. We're doing these top 12, so we'll try to get a little more efficient as we do more rankings. But that was a very fun episode. A lot
Hmm.
of lot of fun disparities in there. A lot of fun rankings that are different from the rest of the fantasy community. What you'll see next is running backs. We'll probably start from 24, go up to 13, and then we'll do a separate episode from 12 to 1. And that'll be a fun episode too, because when you start getting past the top 12, it's a little less consensus, and there might be some fun rankings in there. We might have a guy down at like 25 and 15, and the average is out to 20, and he's somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll work on our rankings, and next episode you'll see is that one. So yeah, looking forward to that. Any last thoughts?
No, yeah, QB. I think it'll be fun. I was taking a look at my rankings from last year, and just how different things can be. Like, because
Yep.
that's like I like that we have Caleb so high. Like some of these guys that just
Yep.
aren't consensus, because when you look back at the fantasy pros at the beginning of the year and then where it finishes, it's just always so different because of
Always.
injuries, breakouts, big years. So it's fun to kind of put your stamp in. Like we clearly have a few guys that we're higher on, and who knows, we might look really smart or really dumb.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It's fun to kind of have our established list and be a little bit different.
Yep. I mean, again, Stafford and T Law, top four
Yep,
guys last year, not even drafted remotely close to that. So,
exactly. Yep.
yeah. But, all right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see y'all in the next episode.
Jeez.